And these extreme rabbis on YouTube that preach the most extreme possibilities of Judaism are actually very helpful in that time of extreme crisis. But once you get through that, it's very I'm at a point now and I'm like, wow, why did I believe these rabbis? But it's not really like that. It's just putting into perspective that they help get to that next step where you have to learn to walk.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the approach I have with counter-missionary rabbis. I think that they do a lot of good to help someone coming out of Christianity, but you shouldn't spend more than 6 months in that world. After 6 months in Judaism, you should already graduate into actual studying Jewish history, halacha. Like people who just listen to Tanakh talk, that's all they listen to. It's just, they know a million different ways to disprove the New Testament. That already gets old. There's so much to learn in Judaism that if you don't wake up and get on the ball now, you're never going to get there. You know, the goal is to be able to have a discussion with the rabbi, learn the same stuff that rabbis learn, not be happy with the scraps of, oh, well, I study this and you study that. No. This is what I encourage people to go to Yeshiva University, which is yutorah.org, and it's basically classes by rabbis for rabbis, because that's the goal. Now, I understand that Tanakh Talk is not there to encourage people to be Jewish. One has to start preparing yourself to live in the Jewish world. If you live in a Jewish community and people invite you over for Shabbos and you want to have a discussion with them, I mean, what are you just going to talk about how Paul is incoherent or how Jesus is the false Messiah? No one wants to hear that. People, many times I've been in the Shabbat table and they go person by person to say a Devar Torah. And what are you going to say? You got to say something. This is why I try to equip people to enter real Jewish life. I cover almost everything on my show, but the stuff that gets the most hate is the proselytizing, and people think that's all I do. No, but I discuss the Rambam and how to understand halacha, and that's really is what's going to determine the shidduch you end up with. If you're in yeshiva and they're saying, well, this guy's, he knows halacha, he has a great mind, let's set him up with like a very high caliber woman. That could be that maybe she comes from a prestigious family, maybe she's like a tzaddiket in her own realm of study or whatever. But in the religious Jewish world, that's how they categorize you, with how much Judaism you actually know. Counter-missionary stuff never comes up. Nobody really knows who Tovia Singer is. Nobody knows who Michael Skobag is. In the real Orthodox world, because no one really deals with converts. No one deals with Noahides. If an average Noahide walked into an Orthodox synagogue, they'll be like, what's a Noahide? I mean, they'll think like, oh, okay, a Ben Noach, but that's every Gentile. It doesn't compute. People who spend so much time on Facebook, they think that this world actually exists in the Jewish world. It does not exist. You walk to those synagogues, they're like, what do you mean? You're a Gentile who just wants to keep 7 laws? They'll be like, does that even exist? I mean, it's huge on YouTube, but who goes to Facebook on YouTube looking for Judaism? It's just not common in the Jewish world. This is why when they see something I teach, it is not the same with what the other people teach. They'll think that I'm some sort of phony or something. In the real Jewish world, there's rabbis who teach different things that you don't hear on Facebook. And that's really, as teachers, what we should be equipping people for, to enter the Jewish community, because that has to be your final destination, okay? Because if you don't move into a Jewish community, you will not remain Jewish. That is a given. Whether you make Aliyah and live in Israel or move to an actual Jewish community in Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles, Houston, whatever, if you don't enter a Jewish community, you won't remain Jewish and your kids won't remain Jewish. That's a given. But it seems that people are happy with this limbo Judaism, that you spend the whole day on Facebook attacking Christians and debating on Messianic websites on how that doesn't help you at all. It doesn't help you in the Jewish world at all. You have to practice Hebrew as much as you can. Jewish history and halacha. That's it over and over and over again. So you could walk into a Shabbat table and people think like, damn it, you're a genius. That's what I try to equip people for. In terms of mysticism, nobody wants to hear that on a Shabbat table. Why? Because it's so subjective. It doesn't really matter. It's like you start quoting the Ramchal, they'll be like, okay, that's nice. Next. I'm telling you, books on Musar don't help you in discussing Judaism, especially if you taught them to yourself, which is typically the approach that these Noahides and new converts on Facebook take. Like they'll read The Way of God, like Mesilas Yesharim and all these things on their own, and then they'll create this blob of Kabbalistic opinion and they'll walk around thinking they're so smart, copy pasting on Facebook. In real life, that's not going to help you in real life. Like Tanakh Talk has this trend of being very Breslov. Many people who are converts and they're big on Facebook, they're drawn to anything hippie and spiritual, like very rough drawers, this and that. The truth is that's not taken seriously in the Jewish world. even in Israel. Like that hippie style. Now, there's some serious Breslovs, but that's not typically the Facebook Breslov. Like the Breslovs from Svat, and I'm not talking about like the Nanachs, who dance around all this stuff. No one takes those guys seriously. Those guys are a bunch of potheads, and they vandalize buildings all over Israel with their, Nana Nachman, Nachman Meuman all over the freaking place. People don't take that seriously. It's because what's wacky sells. In the Jewish world, they want people to be clean cut and very quick when it comes to halacha. Gemara is like a key. That's where we have to try to get to. And that's what I try to help people understand. But they're only really going to get to that point if they're able to accept different opinions and be able to process it without calling people names and heretic. And that's where it's done in the Jewish world that rabbis call a lot of people heretics, but it's not that common. Because if it's like you'd be calling everybody a heretic, because in the Jewish world, everyone has different views. I mean, there's Chabadniks who eat pork. There's Chabadniks. I just interviewed a guy. He has a channel on YouTube called Firm Reporter. He's telling me like he grew up Chabad and he has many friends that are Mishachistim. And not just that are Elokistim, people who believe that the Rebbe is God, apart from just believing he's Mashiach. And he was telling me that people who believe that he's Mashiach in 770, they eat pork because they were saying that now the Mashiach has come. There's a measure that says that when Mashiach comes, pork is going to be made kosher. And they have a Suda on Tisha B'Av because there's another statement that says that God is going to make all the days of fasting into feasts. You're going to call these people heretics? No, we tolerate it. They're like, okay, this is what they believe, but they keep Torah. Okay, in terms of eating pork, that's not keeping Torah. There's so many different opinions that we have to be able to kind of say, hey, Torah is what unites us. That's it. I don't care what you believe. That you keep Torah, that you believe in God, of course. That's it. That's good enough. If not, then you're going to have a very lonely life in Judaism. Unless you live in a little bubble like Satmar or Tver, like you're like in a little community and everyone just follows the Rebbe.
Rabbi, I got a question for you. It's a little off topic, but it's also on the topic. Do you have your Torah open in front of you? I got a question for you.
No.
Because we're in Bereshit chapter 3. I think I heard you one day say that angels aren't really mentioned in the Torah.
Somewhat. The word malach doesn't mean necessarily angelic being, but just messenger.
And really, I'm just trying to get your insight on this. The translation that I heard John reading out of did mention angels in chapter 3 verse 5. My JPS says, and the serpent said to the woman, you are not going to die, but God knows that as soon as you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like divine beings who know good and bad. And I was wondering if you knew what the Hebrew words there were, Elohim, and maybe a little insight into what that word divine beings or translated angels would be.
It does say, my translation says angels. Some do say divine beings. Some say gods. If you have like an English Christian version, it's most likely going to say your eye will open and be like God.
It says Ke Elohim. That means that you'll be like a God. But it doesn't say anything about divine beings. So it says clearly, it says Ke Elohim, Yidche Tov Vera. It doesn't say anything about divine beings. It says that you'll just be like God, knowing good and evil. Are you guys using a Christian translation? Because those, I'll tell you, are typically more accurate than the Jewish translations.
I got a JPS with the Hebrew on the side over here.